Today, I'm talking about what I like to call the 401k accident. Stick with me, my friends, because there's a little bit of a history lesson that goes along with this rant. One of the biggest financial shifts in American history happened right in front of people, and almost nobody stopped it. No protests, no headlines screaming what was really going on. No single moment where anybody stood up and said, hey, hold on, wait a minute, that doesn't look like a very good deal. Because it didn't happen all at once, it happened slowly, quietly, and in my opinion, very, very intentionally. There used to be a deal. And that deal kind of went something like this. You work, you stay loyal, you give a company decades of your life, and when you're done, they don't just shake your hand and wish you luck. They pay you for as long as you have a pulse. Every month for the rest of your life. Something for the effort. Cash money, moolah, dinero, dollar bills, y'all. That, my friends, is what we used to call a pension, and companies like American Express were offering versions of this all the way back in the 1800s. Not because they cared, because it kept you there. Companies didn't give a shit about workers. To them, it was like keeping their dogs on leashes. In fact, when pensions started, they weren't really even guaranteed. You had to be recommended for retirement by your general manager. So in other words, your boss had to like you. Talk about a system tailor-made for ass kissing. But let's face it, you don't walk away from a job when it means you're giving up your future. And for a while, it kind of worked both ways. Now, here's the stuff that they were, keeping out of the brochure, so to speak. A lot of companies were making promises that they hadn't actually paid for. They were basically betting on the future and kind of hoping that nobody ever checked the math. Bernie Madoff was not the first one to ever run a Ponzi scheme. Major corporations were perfecting that model long before he came along. So in 1963, reality hits when Studebaker collapses. Thousands of workers who thought they were set for life find out they're not going to get what they were promised. Decades of work wiped out, basically because the system allowed it. Some got pennies, some got nothing, and that should have been the moment when everything changed for the better, but it wasn't, because instead it was the moment that everything changed direction. The stage was set and the fix was in, or incoming, however you want to characterize it. Now, you may think that it was well-intentioned, and you're entitled to your opinion, but here's mine. The Employee Retirement Income Security Act gets passed. ERISA, we'll call it, because that's what it's called. On the surface, this sounds like exactly what workers needed. Rules, oversight, accountability, and yeah, it did some of that. But it also made pensions harder to run, more expensive to maintain, more unpredictable for companies trying to plan long term. And once that happened, pensions stopped being a benefit and started to be a problem. Imagine that. Government gets involved, adds regulation, things don't go as planned, ultimately becoming more expensive. Well, there's a fucking shocker. Now, this is the part in the story where I introduced the villain. We'll say this is the part where the monster was born. In 1978, there's a small section of tax code that was added, Section 401k. Now, this is kind of a really small, almost forgettable piece of tax code, and it really wasn't ever pitched to replace pensions. In my opinion, it was probably put there for the higher earners as a sort of a tax advantage. A side option, something extra for executives to be able to hide their bonuses, basically. Then along comes a guy named Ted Benna, and he figures out a way to use this code for the masses. The IRS signs off on it in 1981, and just like that, we've got a new way to do retirement. And here's the reason I said this is the moment the monster was born, because the refired reality of all this is even Ted Benna has looked back at what he created and called it a monster. He himself said it has become too complex and it was never ever meant to replace a pension. When the architect of the system admits the building is haunted, you're in trouble. And here's why I said that it was very, very intentional. Corporations looked at that and saw something very different than what workers saw. Workers saw opportunity. Corporations saw an exit. Why guarantee someone income for life when you can just contribute a fixed amount and be done with it? Why carry long term risk when you can hand that risk over to the employee? That's not really a tough decision. And that wasn't the market evolving. That was a decision. Companies froze pensions and they phased them out. To pacify workers, they didn't lead with, we're taking away your guaranteed retirement. They used language more like, you're in control now. That sounds empowering until you think about what's actually changed. Even government employee pension plans were mostly moved out of civil service pensions and into FERS and the TSP, which is basically Big GovCo's version of the 401k. Because why wouldn't they? Because as far as I can tell, the government has never seen a screw job that they didn't want to get in on. And the funny thing is, some people still kind of believe the hype, but let's look at it from both perspectives. What'd you actually lose? Well, before you knew what you were getting, you didn't have to be an investor, and you didn't have to know how long you were going to live. And don't forget the most important part, that 401k thing was supposed to be an addition to your pension, not a replacement. But once it became the replacement, now we're left with a digital ticker tape that we have to check every morning like we're day trading for our own survival. You're managing your own portfolio, you're timing your own retirement, you're hoping the market behaves, you're carrying all the risk, and if it doesn't work out, well, too damn bad, that's on you. Let's not dance around it. Corporate balance sheets got cleaner, executives got more predictability, and Wall Street got trillions of dollars to manage. They didn't just get your money, they got a permanent subscription to your labor. Fees, funds, advisory services, they take their 1% to 2% off the top, whether you're winning or losing. I mean, honestly, it's the ultimate rent-seeking scam built around your responsibility. Meanwhile, the average worker got screwed. Today, pensions in the private sector are basically gone, not because they were impossible, but because there was a better deal for the greedy pieces of shit making the decisions. So as we look back to see how it happened, nobody showed up at anybody's door and just said, hey, we're removing your guaranteed retirement. They didn't have to. They changed the system slowly enough that by the time that people realized what happened, it was already normal. And that might be the most impressive part of the whole thing. Not that it happened, but that it happened without anybody ever questioning it. Now, there's something I want you to understand. I mean, it took literally years of corporate muckety bucks proving to me time and time again that they really didn't have good intentions for me to become the cynical old bastard that I am today. It took life proving me right for decades for this to happen. And if you happen to find these history lessons with a little dose of sarcasm sprinkled on top, an old man rants, entertaining, then hit that like and subscribe button. Do all the things that make the video do what it do, and I'll see you in the next one.